So life in 2019. And so the CNN, constantly negative news network, likes to tell us how bad things are. And so what I'm going to do is talk about where we've come. And I'm not going to get into all the data on how good we are, but I'm just going to talk about where we come from to this point in time. Many of us, if we went to our great-grandparents or our great-great-grandparents, we would not want to be them because of how much progress that we've made. And that's one indicator of the progress we're making. Spanish flu, 500 million were infected, up to 50 million estimated deaths in 1919. Women's rights, the 19th Amendment was approved in 1919. The first US Army transcontinental motor expedition took 60 days to complete in the year 1919. And that's crazy. And one of the major inventions in 1919 was the toaster. And we already talked a little bit about World War II and the followed just 10, 15 years later, and some of the inventions that we've just talked about. But it was the Roaring 20s. This was quite an ambitiously growing time for the United States at that point. And some of the things I'm going to cover, but not all, but I'm going to cover a lot. I'm going to cover robotics, nanotechnology, health, sensors, AI, 3D printing, energy, travel, space, and longevity. As many of you know, Moore's Law is one of the fundamental underpinnings of this. And when I talked about this in business circles, they might not have heard of Moore's Law, but everybody here has heard of Moore's Law. And it's the underpinning of all of this. And it's no surprise that with nuclear computing coming online, it's way too expensive, like most technologies are when they get started. But we have a lot of parallel processing issues coming up we're dealing with server platforms right now. The nuclear is going to allow that next stage of growth to happen. Although only the chosen few can have access to that right now. But that's quantum computing, nuclear, that's the quantum computing world is what's going to continue this burst, which the latest graph is in 2010. What's interesting is there's research from, I call it the tortoise and the software, Moore's Law, Ammendahl's Law, and performance trends for the human species. So one of the things as we trend upwards and we get more and more computing power, how about our own mental capacities as human beings? And if we go back to 1910 and we look, there's a couple tests that actually measure our reaction time, they measure our cognitive ability, and there's the Stroop test, the visual recon time, auditory recon time, and working memory capacity. And as you look at those lines, you can see we're not really making much progress. There was a bit of a burst in the auditory recon in the 70s, but we're not even close to the computing power we're inventing. And in the past, we were, obviously there wasn't an issue. We were moving at the speed of a human. And then went to a speed of rails, went to the speed of cars, and now we're at the speed of light. And so one of the big questions as we go through this is how are we interpreting what's around us? Are we interpreting it from a point of chaos and overwhelm? And where are things boring and unnoticeable right now? Remember when I mentioned about the phone and Facebook, how many of you are using Facebook now? First, I asked you that question 10 years ago. How many of you are, when you first got the phone, there's no way I'm gonna do text on this, I'm pure email, or I'm using my BlackBerry, and so you're in this boring, unnoticeable phase. And examples of that abound where you poo-poo it, like I'm not gonna be on Snapchat, I'm not gonna do this, I'm not gonna do that. And as I'm going through this is where are the inflection points where all of a sudden it becomes chaotic and overwhelming for you all personally, but then also for the businesses that you're in and you're operating.